This is one of those campfire stories that just exist. Ones that seem to leave the darkness of the forest and sit down by a crackling campfire. The characters and settings are different, but the wrongness in each retelling never changes. Of course, it's not my story. I'm not involved in its roots or the current cast. Just a wretched retelling. I break it out on cold nights after s'mores, hoping to infect some of the scouts with the goosebumps. But sometimes, I get a few adults too. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, where I'm left with a dying flame, I tell myself this story to feel those jitters too. Route 27 cuts through Daniel Boone National Forest. Like a winding snake amidst tidal waves of ivy, the green hills bobbing up and down are filled with mist before the orange morn. If you've ever driven through it, you'll know what I mean when I say it's overgrown. So overgrown, there's more green earth than blue sky. So overgrown that man's structures are covered in a blanket of emerald ivy. I've driven through Route 27 a few times, and on one occasion I saw an abandoned truck that looked like a chia pet. At the bar, I overheard someone saying that they had to leave that truck out there overnight for a part, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to take it back from the world's reclamation. It wouldn't be incorrect to say the forest can hide just about anything, and as a result, there's plenty of bad mojo surrounding the place. There's local legends of strange things in the forest, especially at the hours where the mist begins to rise, a few hours before sun sinks. These legends range from strange lights, blue and red and yellow, to apparitions of strange creatures that seem to sink into the shadows. On one occasion, a man lost his dog in the woods, only to have two identical dogs returned to him that same night. But there's one story that's more than just strange. It's downright terrifying. Locals know to stay away from Route 27 after midnight, and even the truckers who pick up stories here know it. But sometimes, they don't. Or, they're on a tight schedule and don't want to settle for the night. So, they travel through the forest on a lonesome road, letting their jitterbugs crawl up their backs and pray nothing comes for them in the night. Usually nothing does, but one particular man found himself in the middle of Route 27 with a broken down truck. His name was Rodney R.R. Rooney, and he worked for an office supply company and needed to get to Cincinnati in the morning. He had a sit-down in Corbin and was already pushing it when he started up Route 27 around 1:30. And of course, because that's how things go, his semi had an engine failure and stopped dead in the middle of the Ivy Ocean. Rooney had to call out to the nearby city, but nobody could get him until the next day. And his employers would just have to understand nobody could come get him. They told him to get some sleep and lock the doors, and not to leave the vehicle for any reason. Rooney wasn't a superstitious guy, but he had bad experiences with random bikers and thugs rolling by, so he took this advice seriously without realizing the things he should have been looking out for came from the forest and not the road. It was around 4 a.m. when Rooney woke up by a strange sound. He wasn't sure if the time was accurate, but what he did know was the mist had come up and made it look like his semi sank in a pool of gray water. From far off, Rooney heard what sounded like metal screeching, like someone's mechanical machine gone haywire through the forest. It screeched and screamed and sent shivers up his spine, sounding similar to a fork scratching plates times 1,000. The trucker swore he thought he'd heard an amplified car crash and waited for the telltale smashing of metal on wood and rock. But it never came. The screeching started to move closer, abruptly stopped. About 100 feet off, the source obstructed by the misty forest. Then Rooney saw the shape slink out of the trees. Rooney would go on to say he felt in a fever dream. One where something feels similar enough that you don't immediately panic, but there's enough wrongness in subtle ways that puts you on edge. And even after you wake up, you're not entirely sure if you are awake. It's a feeling like everything in the house is shifted half an inch, close enough to the original thing that you don't take notice, but different enough to where you start hitting your toes or reaching for the wrong thing. So when the pale thing came out of the trees, Rooney wasn't scared. He saw a familiar human shape, the arms, the 2 legs, and a head sitting on the shoulders. Even it walked was vaguely familiar, but then Rooney began to see those fever dream details. The body stretched taller. The arms were a bit too long. The legs had extra joints. Its walk seemed forced, as if it wasn't sure how to walk completely. And as it came more into focus, Rooney began to realize this dream was quickly devolving into a nightmare. The thing managed to stumble up to the truck door. It was able to look inside the truck. Or it would have been, had it any eyes. Yet it must have been able to sense something as it scanned the inside, stopping right on the terrified Rooney. No lips covered the pale, needle teeth jutting from the smooth jaws. Then all at once, that same metal scream surrounded Rooney's ears. He watched as the truck's door was torn off its hinge and flew out into the mist. The thing stood in full focus. Rooney had never seen anything like it. He didn't care if it was supernatural or extraterrestrial or hell-birthed. He felt his skin roll up, and to save his sanity, he chalked it up to alcoholic hallucinations, despite him not having a drink in 3 days. The thing then reached with its arm, pale and hairless, and gently grabbed Rooney by the shoulder. Then with incredible strength, it lifted him from the truck and cradled him like a babbling baby. It smelled of flowers, damp and limp flowers. Flowers that were swept away in great black floods and found their way to bleak swamps, yet retained enough of their sweet smell to be hinted at. The thing took him deeper into the forest. It had a den of sorts, way past the misty trees where nobody would know, and in the pitch-black night, underneath the thick canopy of trees and vines, Rooney could only be still as the thing carried him towards its makeshift home. But he felt a burst of panic when he felt wet flaps brush against his face, like damp curtains drenched with dew and summer drizzle. But what caused the panic wasn't the wetness. It was the taste of said wetness. In the second it brushed against his face, he tasted harsh copper, and that taste instantly took him back to a bar fight he had years ago. The fight left him with a broken nose and leaked streams of blood. That taste he got now was of blood. The curtains were skins, he realized. The thing had decorated its place with skins. That and the next part I don't tell the scouts. I just skip over them, but when a bunch of the guys come down here to the bonfire for a few beers and want something to ignite their adrenaline, I let them know the full story, because the story's always been there, waiting for new visitors. The thing put the bumbling and shivering trucker down and began to strip him. In a few minutes, he stood naked, cold, and beyond the point of forming words. He blabbered out cries and whines, and knew for sure he'd be hanging off those branches soon. He wondered how the thing filleted skins, and began to sob. With soft caresses, the thing rubbed a slick palm across his body, and he got the feeling it could feel deeper than just his skin. It left nothing untouched. It had no preferences nor pervish actions. It was a surgeon looking for the cut. Something happened that, to this day, those who hear this story don't quite understand, and it makes you wonder how Rooney felt. Maybe Rooney's tattoo-free skin wasn't interesting enough, or the thing had a change of heart. Maybe it felt pity for the babbling and shivering Rooney. Whatever the reason, the thing stopped touching him, picked him up, and began to walk. He felt the filleted skin again, now all over his body, like the lick of a carnivorous hound, and continued to shiver in the mist cold as an abductor continued out into the forest, to the road. The truck still had its driver's side door torn off, and the thing placed him back into the truck, then started off back to the forest, never to be seen again. Rooney laid there, feeling the brush of air on his left naked side. His skin gleamed in the moonlight from the blood and sweat and tears that managed to crawl across his goose-bumped, rich skin. And eventually, in a stubborn or pure fear and inability to reason, he fell asleep thinking about the thing's teeth and the smell of waterlogged flowers. And he wondered how fresh the skin must have been to be so wet. In the morning, the mechanic drove down, just to find a passed-out naked man covered in dried blood, with a torn truck door 20 feet away, and he naturally called the police. Rooney was placed in a mental hospital for his troubles, but eventually was let go for good behavior. He's gone on to live a normal life, and even has driven on Route 27 again, but he avoids the patches that cuts through Daniel Boone. He avoids it like the plague. And when people ask why he shudders, and the look of terror comes back to him, sometimes he gets the story out in patches of coherent thought and manic heavy breathing. He's even been on a few late-night radio shows to talk about it. I'm sure anybody can find it online now. And those that have heard his story wonder if it's true or not. The thing, as far as I know, has never been seen again. But sometimes dens of skin have been found, long since dried and abandoned, and the footprints nearby are a bit off. Nobody looks further into it, though. Maybe those awful places have always been there. So who can say? Is there something out there, flying fresh and slaying steel, eyeless and angler fish teeth? Personally, I don't know. But I won't drive down Route 27 past midnight. And if you do find yourself on that misty road where those vines feed on the moonlight and overgrown hides, and the overgrowth hides things ancient and horrible, you may meet something that's always been there, waiting for somebody new to tell its story.
Love, your magic spell is everywhere. Love, I knew you well and found you fair. Then you left me and I laughed at fate.